There is a particular kind of cold that waits at the edge of a town, the kind every sensible person learns to respect before childhood is over. In Briar Glen, Vermont, it lived beyond the covered bridge, past the abandoned mill, where the road climbed through black pines toward Ravengard Castle, and the windows glowed red after sunset. Mara Vael had been told all her life never to cross that bridge at night. She crossed it anyway with rain in her shoes, a cracked medicine bottle in her pocket, and her mother's breathing sounding in her memory like paper tearing. The Royal Clinic had closed its shutters before dusk. The human doctor looked at Mara's empty purse and said the Crown stores belonged to families who paid their levy. Her family had paid for years. Mara knew because she copied the clinic ledgers when the clerks grew tired, and she had seen her mother's name marked beside every payment in black ink. But that morning, a red line had appeared through Ellen Vail's account, and under it someone had written, "Debt transferred to House Morcant." House Morcant owned the Lower Valley, the sawmill, the winter grain barns, and nearly every mouth that dared to complain. They also owned Celine Morcant, a pale young noblewoman with pearl pins in her hair and a smile sharpened by practice. Celine had laughed when Mara begged for medicine. "If you want mercy," she had said, "go ask the monster on the hill." So Mara went. Ravengard Castle rose from the ridge like a judgment carved in stone. Its gates were taller than church doors, banded with iron and veined with frost, though it was only October. Lanterns burned along the walls without smoke. Behind the bars, a courtyard lay silent except for the slow stamping of black horses and the whisper of rain sliding down marble wings. The guards saw her before she touched the bell rope. They were not human, not entirely. Their eyes caught the lantern light and gave it back in silver glints. One of them stepped forward, his hand resting near the black hilt at his belt. "No petitions after sundown." "Then call it theft," Mara said, lifting the bottle from her pocket. "Someone stole medicine from a paid account. I want it returned." The guard's mouth twitched, almost admiration and almost pity. Before he could answer, wheels rang against the stones behind her. A carriage rolled up the ridge, its lacquered sides black as wet coal. The crest on the door was a silver crown above a thorned rose. Mara stepped aside too late. Mud splashed her hem. The carriage door opened, and a man in a plain dark coat stepped out alone. He was tall, too still, with hair white as winter ash and a face that seemed made for candlelight rather than morning. His skin held the cool pallor of old marble. His eyes were not red, as children whispered about vampires. They were dark blue, almost black, with a rim of silver around the iris, like moonlight trapped under ice. For one breath, the guards forgot Mara, all attention bent toward him. He moved as if used to rooms making space before he entered them. But he wore no crown, no jewels, no visible sign that he belonged to the castle. And when the guard nearest the gate shifted, Mara saw it. A girl in a blue cloak stepping from the carriage behind him, pushed by a woman's gloved hand toward the shadows of the arch. Mara knew that motion. She had seen traps in human halls, in debt offices, in wedding feasts where a woman cried at the correct moment and a man was ruined by touching her sleeve. Celine Morcant stood near the carriage, rain purling on her lashes, her eyes bright with calculation. Her mother waited behind her with the expression of someone holding a match over dry straw. The girl in the blue cloak stumbled deliberately. The white-haired stranger turned by instinct and caught her shoulders before she struck the stones. Lady Morcant drew in breath. Mara moved before fear could become wisdom. She shoved between the guard and the carriage, seized the stranger's damp lapels, and pulled his mouth down to hers. It was not graceful. Their teeth clicked. His body went rigid as carved stone beneath her fists. Mara's heart slammed so hard she thought the guards could hear it. She kissed him because Lady Morcant's scream was already blooming, because the girl's cloak had been loosened on purpose, because a stranger was about to be chained to a lie in front of a castle full of witnesses. Then one cold hand settled carefully at the back of Mara's shoulder, not holding her captive, only steadying her. The stranger understood. When she pulled away, the courtyard had gone silent. Celine stood with her cloak slipping from one shoulder, looking suddenly foolish. Lady Morcant's mouth remained open, but no accusation came out. The guard stared at Mara as if she had just struck a church bell with her bare hand. Mara forced air into her lungs. "There you are," she said, too loudly. "I wondered how long you meant to leave me freezing at the gate." The stranger looked down at her. His expression did not change, but something ancient and amused moved behind his eyes. "Forgive me," he said, his voice low enough to make the rain seem quiet. "I was delayed by poor theater." Lady Morcant went white. Celine's gaze darted from the stranger's face to the guards and back again. Mara expected the man to step away, to thank her privately, to explain himself. Instead, he offered his arm as if the whole ridiculous scene had belonged to him from the beginning. She took it because her knees had become unreliable, and because every witness at Ravengard Gate was watching. Only when they passed beneath the arch did the guards bow. Not to the carriage, not to Lady Morkant, to him. The great hall of Ravengard smelled of candle wax, wet stone, and roses blooming somewhere deep underground. Mara had never been inside any noble house, much less one built before the country had a name. The ceiling vanished into shadow. Portraits watched from the walls, their painted eyes turned toward the man whose arm she still gripped too tightly. He did not shake her off. That frightened her more than anger would have. "You may let go," he said. Mara did, immediately. Her fingers ached from clutching him. "You're welcome," she said, because terror made her rude. "They were going to make a scandal out of you, were they?" The calm question irritated her enough to keep her upright. "Do not do that, you know what they were doing." She fell on purpose. Her mother was waiting to cry ruin before witnesses. "I know." Mara stared at him. Rainwater dripped from the end of her braid onto the black marble floor. "Then why did you catch her?" "Because I wanted to know who would speak first." The hall seemed to lean closer. Mara looked past him at the silent servants, at the guards lining the walls, at the way no one dared breathe until he finished speaking. The truth arrived slowly, then all at once. "Oh," she whispered, his silver-rimmed eyes held hers. "You did not know." Mara stepped backward. "No." The nearest servant lowered his head. "Your Majesty, shall I send for dry clothing?" "Your Majesty." Mara's stomach dropped as if the floor had opened beneath her. The stranger she had kissed at the gate, the man she had yanked from a trap like a lost traveler, was not a careless nobleman. He was King Lucien Vael, ruler of the Northern Night Court, holder of the crown stores, lord of every vampire house from the Green Mountains to the Winter Coast. The richest duke would have been bad enough. The Vampire King was a disaster with teeth. Mara sank into a curtsy so fast she nearly slipped. "I apologize. For which part?" "For all of it. That is broad." She looked up despite herself. His mouth was not smiling, but the idea of a smile rested there. It made him look less like a monster from sermons, and more like a tired man who had not expected the evening to become interesting. "If you had the matter in hand," Mara said, forcing steadiness into her voice, "then my interference was unnecessary." "Unnecessary," Lucien said, "but illuminating." Lady Morkant and Celine were escorted into the hall then, both trying to look as if they had meant to arrive in disgrace. Lady Morkant curtsied so low her pearls clicked together. "Your Majesty, this common girl assaulted you. My daughter was frightened by the spectacle. We only wish to protect your dignity." Lucien turned his head. The temperature seemed to fall. "My dignity survived." Celine looked at Mara with pure hatred. "She is no one." "No," Lucien said softly. "She is the first person tonight who acted as if justice mattered when she believed power was absent." The word struck the hall harder than a shout. Mara wanted to disappear. She had not crossed the bridge to become a symbol. She had crossed it for medicine. Lucien noticed the bottle in her hand. "You came to the gate before the carriage." "Yes." "Why?" Mara held up the bottle. "My mother has gray fever. The clinic clerk said her account was transferred to House Morkant, though we paid the winter levy. I copied those ledgers myself. Someone changed the page." Lady Morkant's eyes flashed. "Clinic accounts are no concern of a Vale girl." "They are when my mother cannot breathe," Mara said. Lucien extended his hand. Mara hesitated before placing the bottle in his palm. His fingers were cold, but his hold was gentle. He read the paper label, tied around its neck. A line appeared between his brows. "Ellen Vael," he said. The name changed him. Not much. A human might have missed it. Mara did not. His stillness tightened into something wounded and old. "You know my mother?" Lucien closed his hand around the bottle. "I knew a woman by that name a long time ago." Lady Morkant interrupted quickly. "A common name, Your Majesty, perhaps." His gaze did not leave Mara. "Bring medicine from the crown stores. Enough for the full course. Send a physician to the Vale cottage tonight." Mara's knees weakened. "I cannot pay for royal medicine." "You already paid." "Then let me see the ledger." Several servants looked up. Lucien studied her. "You ask for records before gratitude? Gratitude will not stop them from doing it again." For the first time, the Vampire King smiled. It was brief and devastating, like moonlight touching a blade. "No," he said, "it will not." Lady Morkant's hands curled in her skirts. Celine's face hardened into a promise. Mara saw both and understood that saving the king had not saved her own life from trouble. It had invited trouble to learn her name. By morning, every house in Briar Glen knew that Mara Vael had kissed the Vampire King at his own gate and lived. By noon, the story had grown teeth of its own. Some said she had bewitched him. Some said he had marked her. Some said the Morcants had been humiliated so thoroughly that Lady Morcant had broken 3 mirrors before breakfast. Mara cared only that her mother's fever eased. The physician from Ravengard left 2 neat boxes of medicine, a kettle of dried herbs, and instructions written in a hand so precise it looked printed. He did not ask for coin. He did not even step inside until Mara invited him. That alone told her whose orders he followed. Ellen Vael woke near dusk. Her hair, once black, lay silver across the pillow. Her eyes focused slowly on Mara. "You crossed the bridge." "I did. Did the king see you?" Mara adjusted the blanket. "Everyone saw me." Her mother closed her eyes. A sigh moved through her, not quite relief. "Then it has begun." Mara stilled. "What has begun?" Ellen's fingers searched blindly until they found Mara's wrist. "If he asks about the blue ribbon, burn it." "What blue ribbon?" But exhaustion pulled her mother under again, and no amount of gentle pleading brought the answer back. The next day, an invitation arrived from Ravengard, though everyone knew royal invitations were commands wearing gloves. Mara was summoned to review the clinic ledger as a witness. She wore her plain gray dress, pinned her braid under a dark scarf, and told herself she was going only for records, not for the king's silver eyes, not for the memory of his hand steadying her shoulder without taking more than she offered. Ravengard in daylight looked less like a nightmare and more like a place grief had taught to stand upright. Half the west wing was shuttered. Ivy climbed over cracked gargoyles. In the courtyard, servants moved quietly around broken planters where winter roses fought through frost. No laughter lived there, but neither did cruelty. An elderly steward named Oren led her to the archive. He was human with careful hands and a limp he did not mention. "His Majesty said you read ledgers. I copy accounts for the apothecary when he is sober enough to remember I exist." Oren glanced at her and almost smiled. "Then you will find our clerks disappointing." The archive held rows of shelves, each stacked with leather-bound books. Mara forgot to be afraid. She washed her hands, tied back her sleeves, and bent over the clinic ledger with a clerk's pencil tucked behind her ear. Numbers soothed her. Ink had a kind of honesty when people failed it. Lucien arrived without announcement. She sensed him before she saw him, a cool pressure in the air, the faint scent of cedar smoke after snow. He stood across the table, dressed in black with no ornament except a signet ring shaped like a thorned crown. "Do you always forget fear near paper?" he asked. "Paper cannot bite." "That is not always true." Mara looked up. "Has a ledger bitten your Majesty?" "More than once." The answer was so dry that she nearly laughed. She caught herself in time. Kings probably did not enjoy being laughed at, even by women they had accidentally been kissed by in the rain. Together they examined the account. Mara found the alteration before the royal clerk did. The original ink under Ellen's name had been scraped thin, then written over with a transfer mark. Whoever did it had copied the clinic hand, but forgotten that the crown stores used iron gall ink during winter rationing. The false line was too brown. "There," Mara said, pointing. Lucien leaned over the page. He did not crowd her. He kept enough space that she could breathe. "You are certain?" "I am poor, your Majesty." Poor people learn the difference between true ink and lies because lies are usually what take bread from the table. His face went still. Mara regretted the bitterness at once. "Forgive me. Do not apologize for accuracy." Oren returned with a second book, older and bound in blue leather. At the sight of it, Lucien's expression changed again, the same old wound she had glimpsed when he read her mother's name. The steward placed the book down with unusual care. A strip of faded blue ribbon marked a page near the center. Mara forgot how to breathe. "Blue ribbon." Lucien noticed. "What is it?" She could have lied. Her mother had told her to burn the ribbon, whatever that meant. But Mara had spent too much of her life watching silence become a weapon in better hands. "My mother said something last night," she whispered. "She said if you asked about a blue ribbon, I should burn it." Oren's face drained of color. Lucien touched the ribbon as if it might vanish. "Your mother should have been dead 20 years ago." Mara's blood went cold. "What did you say?" The vampire king looked at her, and for the first time since the gate, he seemed not ancient, not powerful, but afraid of what his own memory might mean. "I said," he answered carefully, "that someone has been lying to both of us." The blue ledger was not from the clinic. It was from the old Covenant office, where human families once recorded service to the Night Court in exchange for protection, medicine, winter grain, or pardon of debt. Mara had heard of such contracts from sermons that made them sound like chains. Oren spoke of them differently, as bargains made in desperate years when snow-covered roofs and wolves came close enough to scratch at doors. Lucien would not open the marked page at first. He stood beside the table with one hand resting on the cover, his signet ring dull in the gray window light. The archive clock ticked. Somewhere below, a door closed softly. Mara had the strangest sense that the castle itself was holding its breath. 20 years ago, he said, a woman named Ellen Vael served in this house as a seamstress. She repaired ceremonial garments, copied old patterns, and knew every hidden pocket in the royal wardrobe. She was trusted. My mother sewed, Mara said, before her hands stiffened. She disappeared after Queen Aveline died. Mara had heard the name. Everyone had. Aveline, the human queen who had married the vampire king and died before spring, leaving the West Wing shuddered, and the court half mad with grief. Children whispered that Lucien had loved her so much he stopped appearing by daylight. Priests used the story as a warning about humans climbing too near immortal thrones. My mother never worked here, Mara said, but doubt made the words weak. Lucien opened the ledger. The page bore Ellen Vail's signature. Mara recognized the slant of the E, the stubborn pressure at the end of the name. Beside it was an entry for final wages, unpaid. Under that, in red ink, someone had written dismissed for theft of royal property. She was accused? Mara asked. Not by me. Lucien's voice was quiet, which somehow made it more dangerous. I was given a letter in her hand, confessing she stole from the queen's rooms after Aveline died. I ordered no punishment. I only signed her banishment because I believed she wished to leave. Mara stared at her mother's signature until it blurred. She has lived in a cottage with a leaking roof for years. If wages were owed, she never received them. Then the letter was false. Or the ledger is. Lucien looked at her, and Mara saw approval flicker through grief. Good. Trust evidence, not my sorrow. They searched until the candles burned low. Mara's gift was not magic, not beauty, not noble blood. It was patience. She matched ink shades. She compared hands. She found 3 accounts transferred to House Morcant after servants were dismissed from Ravengard. All were human women who had worked near Queen Aveline. All had been accused of theft. All had unpaid wages converted into debts. Orin made a sound like a prayer breaking. Lucien stood so still, the candle flames leaned away from him. My counsel told me those women abandoned the court after the queen's death. Someone needed you to believe everyone loyal to her had left, Mara said. He closed the ledger. And your mother knows why. Mara thought of Ellen's fevered warning. Burn it. If she knew something, fear kept her quiet. Fear of me? It should have been easy to answer yes. He was the vampire king. His castle darkened the valley. His guards could hear heartbeats through doors. Yet Mara remembered the gate, his careful hand, the medicine sent without price, the way he waited for her to decide whether to tell him the truth. Fear of what people do in your name, she said. That struck deeper than yes would have. Lucien turned toward the shuttered west wing. For a moment his age showed. Not in wrinkles, but in stillness worn thin by years of standing alone. A king who hides in grief, he said, lends his shadow to cowards. Mara had no comfort large enough for that. She offered the only thing she trusted. Then stop hiding. Orin looked horrified. Lucien did not. He looked at Mara as if she had opened a inner room sealed too long. You speak to kings like ledgers, he said. Ledgers at least can be corrected. And kings, that depends whether they want truth or worship. The silence afterward was enormous. Mara realized she had gone too far. Then Lucien reached across the table and turned the blue ledger toward her. Truth, he said, in the marked seam of the binding, tucked where only someone who repaired books would think to look. Mara saw a thread of blue ribbon caught beneath the leather. Attached to it was a scrap of fabric embroidered in silver with half a name. Not Aveline, Ellen. Mara carried the embroidered scrap home under her bodice, sewn into a small cloth pocket by her own shaking hands. Lucien did not forbid her. He did not command her to bring Ellen to Ravengard. He sent Orin with a carriage and waited at the bridge until Mara decided whether to accept it. That waiting unsettled her most. Power, in Mara's experience, never waited. It knocked. It seized. It wrote red lines through accounts and expected the poor to call it law. Lucien could have lifted her life between 2 fingers. Instead, he stood in the franchute beside his horses, bareheaded beneath the darkening sky, and said, Your mother may refuse me, and if she does, then I will have earned the refusal. Mara looked at him for a long moment. You are very strange for a monster. I have had centuries to practice. Ellen refused the carriage at first. Then Mara showed her the scrap. Her mother did not cry. She folded inward, as if the thread had been holding her upright for 20 years and someone had finally cut it. Where did you find that? In the Covenant ledger. Ellen closed her eyes. I hid it there the night I ran. Lucien remained outside until Ellen allowed him in. He entered the cottage like a man stepping into a church he had once burned by accident. He removed his gloves. He bowed to Mara's mother, not deeply enough to insult her, but far more than a king needed to bow in a poor woman's room. Ellen Vael, he said, I wronged you. Her mother's mouth trembled. You believed what they gave you. I chose grief over investigation. That is not innocence. Mara stood near the hearth, hands clenched in her apron, and understood why people feared him. Not because his teeth were sharp or his shadow too still, but because he could name his own guilt without flinching. Ellen told the story in pieces. Queen Aveline had not died of weakness, as the court announced. She had been ill, yes, but recovering. Her medicine had been altered by someone with access to the royal stores. Ellen found the wrong vial hidden in a sewing basket after the funeral, wrapped in blue ribbon from a gown she had repaired. Lady Morcant was not Lady Morcant then, Ellen said. She was the council treasurer's daughter. She handled supply marks. I saw her outside the Queen's room the night before the fever turned. Lucien's face became unreadable. Why did you not come to me? I tried. Ellen's fingers twisted in the blanket. Your council stopped me. They said grief had made you unstable. They gave me a letter with your seal ordering my silence and exile. They said if I spoke, every human covenant family would lose protection. I had a child to keep alive. Mara touched the wall for balance. Me? Her mother's eyes found hers. You were still small enough to sleep in a basket beside my sewing chair. There was more. There is always more, when silence has lasted long enough to grow roots. Ellen had taken the scrap because it carried a stain from the false medicine, proof that the Queen's treatment had been changed. She hid it in the ledger, planning to return when it was safe. It never became safe. Lucien listened without moving. When Ellen finished, he stood and walked to the small window. Outside, the last light had drained from the pines. His reflection did not show in the glass, only Mara's and Ellen's, pale beside the hearth. House Morcant controls the clinic accounts, Mara said. If they shifted old wages into debts, they could silence witnesses and profit from the medicine. Yes, then they are still doing what began with the Queen. Lucien turned. His eyes were darker than the spaces between stars. Yes, Mara expected rage. Instead, he looked at Ellen and said, May I take the scrap for testing? Ellen looked at Mara. For years, Mara had been her mother's hands, her clerk, her errand girl, her defender against polite cruelty. Now the decision sat between all of them. We will take it together, Mara said. Lucien accepted the correction with a nod. Together, then. That was the first night Mara entered Ravengard by choice. The West Wing had been locked since Queen Aveline's death. Its corridor smelled of dust, winter roses, and old smoke. Lucien carried no lantern. He did not need one. Mara carried two. Because needing light was not a moral failure, and because she liked seeing what could hurt her before it tried. Orin walked behind them with the blue ledger pressed to his chest. Ellen was too weak for the stairs, but she had sent Mara with a thimble worn smooth by years of work. If you doubt what you see, she had whispered, look at the seams. So Mara looked. The Queen's chamber had been preserved so perfectly that it felt less like mourning and more like imprisonment. A comb lay on the vanity. A shawl rested over a chair. Dried roses stood in a vase, their petals dark and curled. On the bed, beneath a linen cover, lay a ceremonial gown of midnight velvet. Lucien stopped at the threshold. Mara heard the catch in his breath. It was slight, almost nothing, but it stripped him of centuries. I have not entered since the funeral. You do not have to. I do. He did not move, but I may need a moment. Mara set one lantern on the floor between them, making a small circle of gold. She did not touch him. She did not tell him grief ended when truth began. She only waited because he had waited for her at the bridge. At last, Lucien stepped inside. The gown was heavier than Mara expected. Silver thread ran along the bodice in thorned patterns, each stitch precise enough to make her chest ache. Her mother had made some of these stitches. Mara knew it in the way the thread turned at the corners, economical and proud. The official record says Aveline tore this gown during a fever fit, Lucien said. The council burned the damaged panel. They did not burn all of it. Mara turned the hem. There, hidden beneath a fold, was a repair so fine most eyes would pass over it. But Ellen had taught her that seams remember what people try to forget. Mara eased the stitches open with a pin from her hair. Inside the hem lay a narrow paper packet, brittle with age. Orin whispered, Merciful night. Lucien reached for it, then stopped. He looked at Mara. You found it. She picked it up. Inside was a letter in Queen Aveline's hand, addressed to Lucien but never delivered. Mara read it aloud because his face told her he could not. Aveline had known she was being poisoned, slowly, carefully, through medicine marked as royal treatment. She had not known by whom, but she suspected the supply office. She wrote that if she died, Lucien must protect the Covenant families because the attack on her was only the first strike against the human protections she had pushed him to strengthen. At the bottom, in a weaker line, she had added a final request. Trust Ellen Vael. She sees what others miss. The room blurred. Mara lowered the letter. Lucien stood before the bed with his hands open at his sides as if holding nothing had become unbearable. For 20 years, grief had told him one story. A forged confession had told him another. Now a dead queen spoke from the hem of a gown, and all the years between seemed to break across his face without a sound. "I loved her," he said. Mara swallowed. "I know. I do not know what to do with love that has nowhere to go." The honesty hurt more than any flirtation could have. Mara folded the letter carefully. "Maybe it goes into doing what she asked." Lucien looked at her then, and the air changed. Not into desire, not exactly. Into recognition, quiet and frightening in its tenderness. "You keep giving me back my duties," he said. "Someone has to. Your court seems terrible at it." The corner of his mouth moved. Then he held out his hand, palm up, leaving the choice visibly hers. Mara placed the letter there, and his fingers closed around it without touching her skin. That restraint was the thing that undid her. Not his power, not his beauty, not the old stories about immortal kings. The fact that he could have taken anything and kept asking first. Outside the West Wing, bells began to ring from the lower town. Orin hurried to a window and went rigid. "What is it?" Mara asked. The old steward turned, his face gray. "House Morkant has called an emergency court. They accuse Ellen Vael of stealing crown medicine and forging royal records. They ask for seizure of your cottage by dawn." Mara looked at Lucien. The letter in his hand trembled once. Then the Vampire King said, "Let them gather witnesses." By midnight, the old court hall below Ravengard was full. Humans stood on one side, vampires on the other, and between them ran a strip of black marble that no one crossed without permission. Lady Morkant had chosen the room well. It made every poor petitioner look smaller, and every noble accusation sound like law. Ellen was brought in wrapped in a blanket, pale but upright. Mara walked beside her, one hand under her mother's elbow. The Morkant clerks smirked when they saw the patched cuffs of Mara's dress. Celine stood near the dais in white silk, arranged to look innocent beneath the chandeliers. Lucien had not yet arrived. Lady Morkant used that absence like a knife. "The king is delayed because even he understands the ugliness of this matter. A human servant dismissed for theft returns through her daughter, who has already shown a talent for public indecency. Now forged letters appear exactly when House Morkant's lawful accounts are questioned." Murmurs stirred through the hall. Mara felt heat climb her neck. The kiss at the gate, which had saved a stranger from a lie, was being reshaped into proof that she was shameless enough to invent one. That was how power worked. It did not only take bread, it renamed your courage until you were ashamed of it. Celine stepped forward. "I saw her throw herself on His Majesty. My mother and I were concerned for him. Miss Vael has clearly sought advancement from the beginning." Mara almost laughed. Advancement. Her mother could barely stand. Her cottage roof leaked over the bed. She had mud on the hem of her only decent dress. "Did I seek advancement when your clinic denied medicine already paid for?" Mara asked. Lady Morkant smiled. "The ledger says no such payment exists." The ledger was scraped. "By your hand, perhaps." A clerk opened the clinic book and displayed the altered page. From a distance, the false line looked official enough. People wanted official marks to be true. It saved them the burden of deciding what justice cost. Then the doors opened. Lucien entered without a crown. He wore black, simple as the shadow, and every candle in the hall bent toward him. The room dropped to its knees in a wave, except Mara, who was holding her mother, and Lady Morkant, who sank last. "Rise," he said. No one breathed easily afterward. Lady Morkant recovered first. "Your Majesty, we grieve to bring such corruption before you." "Do you?" "Deeply." "Then you will be relieved to know I have brought records." Orin came behind him carrying the blue ledger. 2 guards carried sealed clinic books. A third carried a wooden case packed with old medicine vials, their labels preserved by wax. Lady Morkant's smile thinned. Lucien looked not at her, but at Mara. "Miss Vael, you found the first alteration. Explain it to the court." The command frightened her less than his trust. Mara stepped forward. Her voice shook at first, then steadied as she spoke of ink, scraping, winter ration marks, unpaid wages, and the transfer of human debts to House Morkant. She did not speak like a noble. She spoke like a woman who had spent years counting every coin twice. The clerks tried to interrupt. Lucien silenced them with one lifted hand. Mara opened the blue ledger to Ellen's page. "My mother was accused of theft after Queen Aveline's death. So were 3 other women who worked near the Queen. All owed wages. All debts were later collected by House Morkant." "Coincidence?" Lady Morkant said. "Then this will be another." Mara lifted the Queen's hidden letter. Lady Morkant's face changed before she could prevent it. There, that tiny betrayal of recognition was worth more than shouting. Lucien saw it too. He took the letter and read the Queen's final lines aloud. His voice did not break. That made it worse. Every word entered the hall like a nail placed carefully into wood. Trust Ellen Vael. She sees what others miss. When he finished, Celine whispered, "It proves nothing." "No," Mara said. "The vials do." Oren opened the wooden case. Mara had found the pattern in the labels before court. The Queen's true medicine had a crescent mark under the wax, the false medicine a needle prick beside the lot number. The same prick appeared on recent bottles denied to human families, replaced with weaker mixtures and sold at full levy. Lady Morcant lunged for the case. She did not reach it. Lucien moved too quickly for human sight. One moment he stood on the dais. The next he was before her, his hand around her wrist, not crushing, only stopping. The hall filled with a cold pressure that made every lie feel suddenly small. "Careful," he said. "The court is watching." Mara's heart hammered, but she did not step back. The highest pressure in the room belonged to a king, yet the proof on the table belonged to women who had been told their eyes did not matter. Lady Morcant looked at the vials, the ledger, the letter, and finally at Mara. Hatred gave way to fear. Lucien released her wrist. "Continue, Miss Vael." Mara lifted the vial with the needle mark. "This is not only about my mother. House Morcant stole medicine, wages, and testimony. They used the king's grief as a locked door and charged the valley rent for the key." For the first time that night, the human side of the hall murmured not with fear but recognition. Truth did not arrive as thunder. It arrived as a clerk who began to cry. His name was Peter Ashe, a thin young man with ink on his lips and panic in every line of his face. When Lucien ordered the Morcant records opened, Peter dropped to his knees before anyone touched him. He confessed to copying transfer marks, scraping paid accounts, and carrying sealed letters between Lady Morcant and the old council treasurer, who had died rich enough to buy silence for another generation. Lady Morcant called him a liar until Oren produced the wage receipts. Celine called him unstable until Mara asked why the false medicine vials bore the same tiny needle prick as Celine's private supply stamp. The girl in white silk looked toward her mother then, not innocent at all, only young enough to be frightened by consequences she had thought were for poorer people. The final proof came from Ellen. Mara's mother stood with help. Her voice was weak, but the hall bent toward it. She described the night Queen Aveline's breathing changed. The blue ribbon around the wrong vial, the councilmen blocking the corridor, the forged royal seal pressed into a letter of exile. She did not embellish. She did not ask pity. She simply laid one remembered thing beside another until the shape of the crime stood in the room with them. Lucien listened from the dais. In his face, Mara saw grief forced to become government. It would have been easier for him to rage, to bare fangs, to let everyone see the monster they expected. Instead, he asked dates, names, storage rooms, signatures. He made the truth durable. At last, Lady Morcant broke. "Aveline would have ruined us," she spat. She wanted humans freed from levy debt after 7 years. She wanted the clinic stores audited by village women. Village women. She would have turned old houses into servants of cottage wives. There it was, uglier than poison, because it wore the perfume of tradition. Lucien rose. "Queen Aveline wanted the court to survive its own arrogance. She made you weak." "No," he said. "My weakness was believing grief excused absence." The hall went silent. He ordered House Morcant stripped of clinic authority. Its seized accounts returned, its debts audited publicly by human and vampire clerks together. Lady Morcant would stand trial under crown law. Celine, who had participated in false compromise plots and medicine theft but not the original poisoning, would lose title privileges and serve under supervision in the very clinic her family had corrupted. Celine recoiled as if service were a dungeon. "You will learn the weight of a bottle in a poor woman's hand," Lucien said. "Then perhaps you will understand why mercy cannot be decorative." Mara thought it was over. Then Lady Morcant laughed, sharp and brittle. "You think she stands beside you for justice? The girl kissed you because she wanted a place. Give her one then. Let the court see what all this theater purchased." The old humiliation returned, dressed in new clothes. The hall looked at Mara, at her patched cuffs, at Lucien's stillness. She understood what Lady Morcant wanted. Make the rescue dirty, make the evidence ambition, make Mara small again. Lucien stepped down from the dais, Mara's breath caught. If he defended her as a possession, the court would accept it. The king's chosen woman, the king's pet witness, the king's beautiful scandal. Another cage gilded this time. He stopped before her and bowed, not a polite nod. A real bow witnessed by nobles who had never lowered their eyes to a valley girl in their lives. "Mara Vael," he said, voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "You saved me at my gate when you believed I was powerless. You challenged my records when gratitude would have been easier. You brought my queen's last truth back into the light. I offer you a formal place in the crown audit, with wages, authority, and the right to refuse any command that violates conscience. Mara could barely breathe. He held out the blue ribbon, now cleaned and folded over his palm. I also ask permission to call on you after this court is done, not as king to subject, as Lucien to Mara. The hall did not move. Even the candles seemed stunned. Mara looked at the ribbon, then at the man who could have claimed and instead asked. Her life had been shaped by people taking choices and calling it order. The no-return moment came quietly. She stopped trying to be acceptable to those who only understood obedience. I accept the work, she said. Something like disappointment flickered through the gossiping faces, hungry for romance to swallow justice. Then Mara added, and you may call on me after you have slept at least one full day, because you look terrible. For one impossible second, the vampire king stared at her. Then he laughed. The sound moved through Ravengard like a locked room opening. Winter came early to Briar Glen, but for the first time in years, the clinic did not run out of items before the first hard frost. The new audit office occupied the old tax room beside the court hall. Its door stayed open during daylight hours. Human petitioners entered with receipts folded in careful hands, and vampire clerks learned quickly that Mara Vael could smell false arithmetic from across a table. She was paid every Friday. The first week she bought coal. The second she repaired the cottage roof. The third she hired Peter Ash after his testimony spared him prison but left him friendless. He turned out to be very good at finding fraud when not terrified into creating it. Lucien did call on her. The first time, he arrived at the cottage with no escort and a basket of winter pears from the castle orchard. Ellen made him sit in the chair with the bad leg. Mara expected the chair to collapse under centuries of royal dignity. It held, barely. Her mother asked him whether kings knew how to peel potatoes. Lucien admitted he did not. By the end of the visit, he knew badly. The second time, he came to the audit office after midnight, with 3 ledgers and the expression of a man prepared to be corrected. Mara corrected him for 2 hours. He thanked her for each one. That was unfairly attractive. Their courtship, if anyone dared call it that, became the subject of wild speculation. Some said Mara had bewitched him with the gate kiss. Some said Aveline's ghost had chosen her. Some said the king wanted a human bride to quiet the valley. Mara ignored them all as best she could, though some whispers followed her into sleep. One evening she found Lucien in the west wing, not frozen at the threshold this time, but standing beside an open window while snow moved over the rose garden. The queen's chamber had changed. Dust sheets were gone. The old flowers had been buried. Aveline's gown lay on a work table, not as a shrine, but as a garment being preserved by careful hands. Orin says you ordered the wing reopened, Mara said. Aveline loved morning light. Keeping the shutters closed was never for her. Mara touched the edge of the blue ribbon, now resting beside the gown. And for you? It was easier to worship grief than live beyond it. She stood beside him at the window. Their shoulders nearly touched. In the garden below, workers cleared dead vines from the beds where winter roses would be replanted in spring. Do you feel guilty when you are happy? She asked. Lucien did not answer quickly. She liked that about him. He respected questions enough to let them be difficult. Yes, he said at last, less than I did. Good. Is that an order from my auditor? Advice from someone who knows guilt is a poor house guest. It eats everything and never pays rent. He looked at her then, and the tenderness in his face frightened her, because it asked nothing and still changed the room. Mara, I need you to understand something before the court writes stories for us. I will protect your work whether or not you ever choose me. Your wages, your mother's care, the audit office, the returned debts, all of it stands without romance attached. The words landed softly and remade something in her. She thought of the gate, of cold rain and a desperate kiss used as a shield. She thought of Lady Morcant trying to turn that shield into shame. She thought of every bargain poor women were asked to call love because survival had left them no prettier word. Thank you, Mara said. Lucien nodded, but she saw the pain he hid too late, so she reached for his hand. His fingers were cold. Hers were warm from work and ink. He looked down at their joined hands as if she had placed a crown there. I am not choosing you because you saved us, she said. I am not choosing you because you are lonely. I am not even choosing you because you can terrify a room into better manners, though I admit that has its uses. Practical of you. I am choosing to see what grows when neither of us is trapped. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the silver around his irises shone like thawing ice. May I kiss you, Mara Vael? The first kiss had been collision, scandal, rain, and panic. This one was a question answered. He bent only after she nodded. His mouth touched hers with such restraint that her chest ached. No hunger dressed as entitlement, no ancient claim, only a man careful with the life that had stepped toward him freely. Below them, the workers in the garden began uncovering the old stone beds. Under the dead vines, the soil was still good. In spring, Ravengard opened its gates at noon for the first public covenant hearing in 20 years. People came from the valley farms, the mill roads, the lake towns, and the old vampire houses hidden among the mountains. They arrived suspicious, overdressed, underfed, curious, and afraid. Change, Mara had learned, frightened even those who needed it. The court hall looked different in daylight. Black marble still ran down the center, but Lucien had ordered benches placed across it, joining the two sides. Some nobles objected. Mara handed them written copies of the new seating law and pointed to the complaint box. No one used it while she watched. Ellen sat in the front row wearing a shawl she had made from pieces of Aveline's restored gown, with Lucien's permission and her own tears hidden in every stitch. Oren sat beside her, polished and proud. Peter Ashe took minutes at the clerk table, his ink steady now. House Morkant's crest had been removed from the clinic doors. Lady Morkant awaited sentencing in a guarded estate, and Celine had spent the winter learning that medicine bottles did not carry themselves, nor did sick children care about noble wrists. She was not redeemed. Mara did not require neat endings from people who had caused real harm. But Celine no longer laughed when poor women counted coins. Lucien entered last, crowned for the first time since Aveline's death. The crown was not gold. It was black iron threaded with silver thorns. On another man, it would have looked cruel. On him, after all Mara had seen, it looked heavy. He called the hearing to order and did something no vampire king before him had done. He read the names of every human covenant family whose debt had been extended beyond lawful term. One by one, those debts were struck from the record. Wages owed to dismissed servants were restored with interest. Clinic stores would be audited by a council split between human workers and vampire physicians. No medicine account could be transferred to a noble house without 3 public signatures. When Ellen Vael's name was read, Mara felt her mother grip her hand. Paid in full, Lucien said. 3 words. 20 years returned too late, yet returned. Then he stepped away from the throne and came to stand before Mara. A rustle moved through the hall. She had expected some formal acknowledgement of the audit office, perhaps a royal thanks. Instead, he held a small object in his palm, the blue ribbon, not hidden in a ledger now, not wrapped around a poisoned vial, not buried in a hem with a dead queen's warning. It had been embroidered with new silver thread, Ellen's work steady despite pain, forming 2 names along its length. Aveline, who had asked for truth, and Ellen, who had preserved it. Lucien offered it to Mara. This court once used silence to protect power, he said. Let this stand for the opposite. Not my mercy, not my grief. The courage of those who saw clearly when I did not. Mara took the ribbon. Her fingers did not shake this time. There were speeches after that, because courts loved turning simple justice into furniture. Mara endured them. She endured the curious looks, the whispers, the sudden politeness of people who had once stepped around her in the market. But when the hearing ended, she slipped out through a side door into the rose garden. Lucien found her there at sunset. Escaping your own honor? He asked, resting from it. The winter beds had changed. New roses climbed the trellises, dark red and white, and a stubborn wild pink that refused to match anything. Mara liked those best. Beyond the wall, Briar Glen glimmered with lamplight. The bridge no longer looked like a warning. It looked like a road. Lucien stood beside her. I have another question. You are improving. Last year you mostly made declarations. I had bad habits. You had centuries. That too. He turned toward her, not kneeling, not performing for a hidden audience. Just Lucien, the last gold of evening, ancient and uncertain, and dearer to her than safety had ever been. Will you stay at Ravengard because you want to? As auditor, as neighbor, as the woman who may tell me when my laws are foolish. And if one day you wish it, as my wife. If you never wish it, the first offers remain. Mara looked at the ribbon in her hands. The first time she crossed the bridge, she had carried a cracked medicine bottle in fury. The first time she kissed him, she had thought she was ruining herself to save a stranger. Perhaps she had ruined something. The life where fear chose for her, where silence passed as wisdom, where powerful men were rescued only to become owners. She tied the blue ribbon around her wrist. I will stay, she said, as auditor, as neighbor, as the woman who will absolutely tell you when your laws are foolish. His smile touched every lonely corner of his face. And the rest? Mara stepped closer. Ask me again when the roses bloom twice. Lucien bowed over her ribboned hand and pressed his lips to the knot, not her skin, not yet claiming even that without invitation. The gesture was so careful that it broke her open more than any grand passion could have done. The town bells rang below them, not in alarm this time, but for evening service. Mara leaned her shoulder against his arm. He stood still, letting the small weight of her choice settle between them. Some lives are not saved by princes arriving at the final moment. Some are saved by a poor woman crossing a forbidden bridge, by a kiss used as defiance, by a ledger opened after years of dust, by a king learning that protection without listening is only another locked door, and sometimes, if courage is stubborn enough, the thing you thought would ruin you becomes the road home.